So we'll go ahead and get started. So just so you know, I am trying to, this semester I'll be trying to record the lectures so that we can post them online. This is a hybrid course, some in person, some online. So I'm going to attempt this. We'll see how it works. I've never done this before, so the first few might not come out that well. All right, so but just be aware that anything you say in class might get picked up on the recording. Okay? All right, so this is ITSE1311, Front-End Design, Introduction to HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So if you're not in that class, you're in the wrong place. So most of you, I think everyone except you, Eric, was in my class last semester, so you all know me and kind of how this process works. We'll be using Canvas. We have, I'll put everything in the modules on Canvas, so you should be able to find that on your when you sign in Canvas now. The course is published. This first week, we need to read the book, Deedle. We need to read the first book, Deedle, through chapter 3. We won't be covering all of that material this week, but we'll be covering all of that HTML material probably the next 3 weeks. Okay, 2 to 3 weeks. So go ahead and read all the way through chapter 3. There's an assignment due this weekend. Assignments will be due generally on Sundays at 11:59 p.m. So there will be one every week. Probably sometimes there will be more than one smaller assignments, but something will be due every Sunday at 11:59 p.m. Okay. There will be a final that will be worth 30% of the course. The weekly assignments will be worth 70. The final is going to be worth 30% of the course, and it will be due on the last Friday of the class, which I think is May 15th. I want to say, also at 11:59 p.m. So you will have 2 weeks to work on that final assignment. It will be hard, so be prepared. So the course is going to work pretty much like it did in the last semester. For those of you that had me, everything will be posted here on Canvas, and then all of the slides will be posted on Google Docs, so that you can look at them. We'll be using this is a little bit about me. I'm gonna skip this since all of you already know me. But basically, I'm a professional software developer. I'm not a teacher. So Eric, that you're the only one that has heard this spiel before. But so I am a part-time teacher. I teach as an adjunct here, so I spend my time writing software for a living as opposed to teaching for a living. So I come at it with a slightly different perspective than maybe some of the instructors in your college career. Okay. These are the outcomes. You're going to learn HTML. This is not an advanced course. This is an intro course. So you're going to learn HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. You're going to be able to create a web page and style it and make it look good, and then make it somewhat interactive using JavaScript. Okay, so that's what we're going to learn. We're not going to write Facebook at the end of the semester. Okay, we're going to write some very simple pages. We'll have one of your first major project will be the ITSE game written in an HTML document. So that's a fairly involved project. And if we get to it, then we'll be doing some depending on how much time we have in the class, we'll be maybe creating a Pokédex, which is part of the Pokemon game. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that, but they have this great API for getting data off the internet that we use to style up these pages, which is a great learning tool. So we'll see if we are moving fast enough to use that. But I would hope that the Pokédex would be the final thing. If not, it will be something similarly and also hard. Okay, but we will develop a web page that does something useful. If you can define what useful means, right? Useful in the context of our class, but you will have enough insight in that you will understand basically what web pages are doing. Okay. Here's the thing: keep your phones. Once you're using your phone for class, put it away. Be respectful of time. Be on time. We're only meeting once a week in person, and only for 75 minutes. So these sessions need to be, as much as we can, be getting some information delivered to you, as well as you asking questions and me doing demonstrations and getting stuck. A lot of the slides and the lecture is going to be done online. You're going to have to go through that on your own because I want the 75 minutes that we have with each other to be spent on you getting things that you can't get on your own. by giving examples, working you through any material that you might be stuck on. Okay? So come on in, have a seat. So you know I'm recording the lectures, so just be aware that anything you say in class might get picked up on the mic. I don't know that it will. Okay. So because it's a short class period, only 75 minutes a week, you're going to be expected to learn most of the material yourself. Okay. So that'll be done through lectures. I'm going to try to record our time in class. I'll be sending you some slideshows as well as links to existing online materials that you can use to learn some of the concepts. Okay. It's okay if you work together. Working together and working on problems together is not cheating. Collaboration is not cheating. Copying other people's work is cheating. You're not going to do that. So, okay. At this point in your college career, you should know what cheating is, and you're not going to do it. Okay. It's just data that you can manipulate. Okay. All right. So, any questions so far? Pretty straightforward. All right. So programming is creative, and you learn by doing things. So in this class, we'll be doing things. We'll be writing HTML, creating pages, doing a lot of typing, and working online. Okay. You're gonna read the book. You need to read the book. It will help you. All the information that you need the book has some great examples, but a lot of information is available online as well. So, but we're going to spend our time making things as opposed to studying theory and things like that. Okay. My expectation is that most of you are going for a career as a developer or a career in the business world of some kind. That you're not going to be researchers or computer scientists working on the next database engine and operating system. Right? If that's what you want to do, then great. I encourage that. But my belief is that most of you are looking for jobs as software developers or something like that. And so that's where my teaching will be focused, is getting you prepared for that kind of work. Okay? And you do that by making things. Weekly assignments every Sunday, online, 70% of your grade. I will take late assignments for 80% of an automatic 20 points off, or 20% off of every late assignment. If it's one day late, it's late. After 14 days, I won't take it. So you get a zero. So turn your stuff in on time. Okay, the final project is going to be cumulative, and we'll cover everything that we've done. We were 30%. You cannot pass the class if you don't do final. Okay, so no matter how well you do on the weekly stuff, you're not going to pass if you don't do final. Okay, I don't give tests or quizzes because I don't think they're really helpful in the context of what we're trying to learn here. So I give assignments instead. So, but if you really make me angry or something, I might give you a test and then that'll teach you. All right, so here's what we're using the textbooks. Did you guys get an electronic version of the textbook? Nobody knows, or so? Because I know for last semester's class, the textbook was distributed online. So I don't know if that's the case. This is the book. It's called "The Internet and World Wide Web: How to Program," which is a terrible title. But the book is book's not bad. It has a lot of good examples. It's a little dated, but the core material is still there. So I will assign reading in the book. We're not going to cover the whole thing, but I will assign reading from this book, and some of the examples that we'll do in class and some of the homework assignments might come from the book. So I encourage you to read it. It will help you. Does
the book have actual code or pseudocode?
This one has actual code.
Yes.
As I recall. So yeah, the last one was all pseudocode, but this one has actual code. Actual HTML pages and CSS that goes along with it. So this is a pretty good book. I actually think this one is probably better than the one we used last semester, even if it is a little seems a little old when you look at it. But HTML has been around for like 35 years, so it doesn't change a lot. Okay. And your name is?
Ali. I just registered.
Okay. Oh, you just registered. Okay. You said Ali.
Yes, sir.
So you're not on my list yet. So okay. So you are in. This is 1311 Intro to HTML, CSS, and JavaScript.
Yes.
Okay. So you're not on my roster yet. So I assume you'll be there soon. Okay, so just so you know, I'm recording the lectures, so anything you say in class might get picked up by the mic, so just be aware. Okay? All right. So get the textbook and read it. You can get a copy. You can find it online. However you get it is up to you. I don't really care. Just read it. We're going to use Canvas for all of our assignments. Everything I do to communicate with you will be through Canvas. And there'll be a module for each week that will have the assigned reading and links to the slides that we use and the assignment that's due. One module for each week. Okay. I keep all of my slides in Google Drive. And so there's a link in one of the modules to the folder where I keep all my lecture slides, and any material we do in class, I'll put there. I might use GitHub if we need some examples of code that we do in class that we can share. I use StackOverflow.com. That is a great website. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that, if you use that, but it is. If you are searching for what to do, you type in how do I do X in CSS, and you're going to wind up in Stack Overflow. Okay, or another website called W3 Schools. Those are both tremendous websites for getting help with all manner of programming problems. W3 Schools gets a pretty bad rap because it's been around for a long time and it's not a very pretty website, but it is a really great reference site for everything HTML, CSS. There's lots and lots of really great information there. If you are looking up the specifics of the tag or some kind of CSS attribute, you're going to find something there that will help you. So between W3 Schools, that's kind of a do-it-yourself look at the specs, and the Stack Overflow, you're going to find everything you need here between the sites to answer your questions. Okay. We're going to use these two tools, jsfiddle.net, which we're going to get into today. jsfiddle.net is an online programming platform that lets you do HTML, CSS, and JavaScript and then run it into an HTML page. So you can do it. It's like REPL. It's like Replit, but it's for a full HTML, CSS, JavaScript combination. Okay. So some of your assignments, particularly the one that's due this Sunday, will be a link to your project on JSFiddle. Okay. So you will need to create an account. It's free, but you will need an account on jsfiddle.net. We're also going to use this one, Replit. Replit is another website that lets you write programming, write programs in there in a variety of languages. JavaScript is one of them, so we will do some exercises in Replit using JavaScript. You'll need an account there as well. Okay, they are free and they're great tools. I use them all the time in my work, and you will too. I prefer the Chrome browser for doing this work. You can use Internet Explorer if you really want to. I don't really know how Internet Explorer works on some of the dev tools, so if you're not using Chrome, then you're on your own with some of those questions. Okay, so I don't use Internet Explorer because why would you? I don't think I. So I'm going to use Chrome. Chrome has some dev tools that are built in that let you kind of debug your page and look at your JavaScript and manipulate the contents of the page, and so that's very important in the work. It's very important tools in the work that we're doing, and so we're going to be spending time learning how to use those. And you will need a code editor. I'll probably use VS Code as my code editor. Atom is another great one. You can use Sublime if you want to. I think Sublime asks you to pay for it, so that's up to you as to how you do that. Any of those work. If you really want to use Notepad, knock yourself out. But it's like if you're going to use Notepad, you might as well use it. Right? So anyway, so I like VS Code, but Atom is a great substitute. Okay. Any questions on any of that? No? Okay. I'm sorry, did you have a question? Okay. So that's it for the intros. So we're going to jump in. So flip over to the other slide. Real quick before we get in, there is an assignment due this week. So it's right here, and very simply, you have to create a fiddle, and you have to use each of these tags in your fiddle, and you have to submit it. Okay, so this is a very simple assignment, really some very basic HTML structure. It doesn't have to be pretty. As a matter of fact, it won't be pretty. So, but you need to create an HTML document using JSFiddle.net that uses each one of these tags. What you put inside each tag and what's the content of the page is up to you. But really the purpose of this assignment is for you to get on Fiddle and kind of get comfortable with using that. Okay? All right. So be aware that that's there. Okay. So server side versus client side. This is very simply an HTML. So when we talk about server versus client side, we talk about what machine is doing the bulk of the work. Okay. So when you request a web page, www.somepage.com, it sends a request. Your browser sends a request to the server. The server receives that request and then responds in some way. The server-side response is typically where the server does all the work and takes all the data that you send as a request, generates a static HTML page and sends it back. Okay? That page is then rendered into the browser, and you can see it. So a lot of what you do in Wix or Squarespace or something like that, those are going to be those are static pages. Most pages on the internet are static. All the brochure sites you see, the About Us pages and things like that, almost all of those are static pages. Okay? What that means simply is that the HTML in its entirety is produced by the server, it's transmitted across the wire, is rendered in your browser, and that's it. The page doesn't really change or change its state, or there's very little interaction other than scrolling up and down, clicking on links, looking at pictures. Okay? So this is server side where all of the work is done on the server somewhere away from your browser. Okay? Canvas is mostly server side. W3 Schools is all server side, mostly. Okay? Client side is where the HTML page is dynamic, and this is where JavaScript comes in. Okay, so what the server then, in the client side example, the server is going to send you a starting point, HTML and CSS and JavaScript, that serves as a starting point for your page. Your browser then renders that, and that's where the page begins. But now you begin to use JavaScript to manipulate the page, to interact with the elements on the page, to be able to change them, to move them around, to add new elements to the page, to take data that the user enters in and send it back to the server, to request additional information from the server resource and bring it in and fold it into the page. Okay, so that is where the page is much more dynamic and as you interact, you're changing the content of the page without actually reloading the page itself. Okay, some examples of this are Google. That's a great example. These two, the chase.com website, I use that just because it's a website I happen to use regularly. So it's got a lot of servers, of client-side stuff going on. And then this is an API, which this is really just rendering data. So you're actually interacting with the page and seeing, and it's pulling data back from the server. Okay? So let's do a couple of quick examinations of web pages to kind of make sure we get that. Everybody kind of feel like they get the gist of what these two things are. So if we look at, so here on Canvas, for example, when I come in here, every time I click on something, there's no interaction here. Okay, when I click Edit, the page reloads. You can see the loading bar spins and the page reloads. Okay. And now I'm editing. So here, this is all what's going on. This is a fairly server-side model. There's very little that's happening here that's being dynamically updated. If I were to type here, then this is all just being stored in my browser. Okay, nothing will actually change the content of this assignment until I save. And if I click save, then it takes everything that I've entered on my page and it sends it back as a message back to the server, which updates everything on the server. So this is a slightly interactive page in that I can type in these text boxes, right? But really, for the most part, this is entirely a server-side model, okay? Because the page is not really changing itself as you go. There is if you look at, for example, if we look at Google. So notice here when I'm at Google, okay, once the page finishes loading, we'll let that finish, if it's ever going to finish. But as I begin to type here,
Okay, I can type, searching for something, right? So now what's happening here is I'm getting, every time I type something, this page is transmitting the data that I type back to Google servers. It's receiving a list of potential search phrases and loading it up on my page. So this is client-side activity, and that the content of my page is changing substantially as I'm typing, but it's being done through JavaScript. And so we using calls back to the server as I type data, sends information to the server, gets a response back, and loads that onto the page as I type. Okay. You can see it even more so here as, so it continues to do that. So also, if you look at, we can look at the chase.com site. Here, notice that when this loads, notice that I got that HTML, but did you see all the little spinny bars? Right, that is what's going on there is the base HTML that was sent through was very small. It didn't include any of these pictures. It didn't include any of these icons or anything like that. All that was in the base HTML was just a bunch of divisions of sections of the page. There's this section, there's this section, there's this section. As soon as that kind of empty HTML template loaded, JavaScript runs in the background and sends multiple requests to the server to say, what should I put in the header section? What should I put in the navigation section? What should I put in this other section? Okay, and so it's likely actually that depending on who I am, if you were to look at this page, some of these things might be different for you because maybe you don't use this page as much as I do. Or if you're in a particular city or state, once the client transmits its geolocation, you might get an entirely different set of options here based on your location. Okay, so that's all the client configuring itself using the server resources. Okay, everybody kind of have a feel for that, for the distinction. What we're going to be doing is we're going to be writing all client-side work here. We won't really have a server in what we do because we're just working on HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So everything we're doing will be in the client. Let's look at this one and see what this one looks like. I forget what. So this is a so what this is this is an HTML page, okay, and it has this text box here where you can type in a URL, okay, to a data API. And what's being loaded here is when I type something here and I click submit, what's being sent is this information is being sent from my browser using JavaScript to the server and saying, hey, give me the information for this particular resource, Pokemon number 1, and then it's taking that information and surrendering it here so you can look at it. Okay? So if I were to say, show me for Pokemon number 12 and click submit, notice that all of this information is updated. So the page doesn't reload when I do that. It simply sends a message across the wire, give me the information for Pokemon number 12, and then it loads the title of that Pokemon, and then it gives you this whole data element that comes back. This data is transmitted in something called JSON, which stands for JavaScript Object Notation, and it is a giant data structure. Okay, and so we'll be using this in our ITSE game as we get into that. But this is a way. This is an HTML rendering of what that data looks like when it's transmitted over the wire. Okay, if you were to look at the dev tools, we'll give a quick jump ahead here. Can you read that on the dark mode? But so when you look at the dev tools here, if we look at the network, we can see that when I type show me number 14, we can see that that my browser just sent a message, okay, to some server. The network panel on the dev tools shows all of the network traffic in and out of the browser. What's being sent, what's being received, and I have mine limited. This is showing all. You can limit it to particular types of media that are coming in. But we can see that I sent a request here, and you can look at the headers, and this shows you the type of information that was sent. It's essentially requesting a URL, very similar to if you had typed it up here on your browser. And then you can see the response that comes back. This is the information that was transmitted. So when I type google.com, the thing that comes back is an HTML document, and my browser knows how to render that. When I go to this particular URL and ask for data, the information I get back is not an HTML document, it's a JavaScript document, it's a JSON document. So it's data. So, but this is not really renderable by a browser. This is data that comes back into my JavaScript program that I then use to do something on the page. Okay? So this browser is doing a lot of stuff in the background other than just rendering the HTML. Okay? All right. Okay, so first things first is let's do a little typing. Okay? Just to get our fingers nimble. We can do this in Fiddle if you want. Let's go ahead and do that in JS Fiddle. Okay? So JS Fiddle, you just load it up. If you just go to jsfiddle.net, that's better. Huh? Okay. All right. So, so what we're going to type here is our example is to type this. Okay. So this heading right here, we don't need in JS Fiddle. This is a heading that tells the browser what kind of document is being received, and this means that the document is going to be HTML5. Okay. Because we're in Fiddle, we're not dealing with an entire document. Okay, so we won't actually be using this. The head portion also we won't be using in Fiddle because Fiddle is already provided the head portion. Okay, so we're just going to type this. We're going to do a body tag and a paragraph tag. Okay, so we come in here in Fiddle and we just type body. We type a paragraph, and we type this. Let's see, I think it was hello HTML. Okay. So notice as I type that the editor is helping me. It's giving me some. When I type a tag, if I'm typing a container tag, the editor is going to be filling in the closing tag for me. Okay. And so I'm getting a little help as I'm typing there. Once I've typed, I can click this tidy button, and what that will do is it will fix all my indentation. So if my indentation is all off, when I click tidy, it puts it all into proper indentation. Okay, indentation is important here. Okay, and then once it's done, I can click run, and then I see down here in my results, I get a paragraph is rendered. Okay, so that's it. HTML lesson over. You now know everything you need to know about HTML. Okay? So your assignment, and you can fool around with this. You could, if you take out the body tag, you can render that. You could try to put in an extra line here. What do you think is going to happen when I run this? Think it's going to be on a separate line? It is not on a separate line because carriage returns inside HTML are meaningless. So you can have another tag there, a line break tag. That'll move it down. Okay. But this is essentially the way Fiddle works. Okay. You type things into HTML, into the HTML tag. If you want to include CSS for JavaScript, you can put them into these panels. We'll be getting into those in weeks coming. For now, we're just going to be using the HTML section. Okay. So your assignment for this week, is to create a Fiddle using each of those tags that are listed in the assignment. Okay. All right. So that's the quick intro. Now let's break it down a little bit. Okay. So I got ahead of myself a little bit. Okay. So but here, let's look at our sections of the content. This whole thing is an HTML document. Okay, starting with this line all the way down to this line. Okay, the document here, this stands out of the document and tells the browser what you're about to receive is an HTML5 document.
versus an older HTML version, HTML3, 4, one of those that has different compatibilities. Okay, so this is HTML5. If you want to have a comment, you can include it using this is the less-than symbol, an exclamation point, and 2 dashes, and then it's closed with 2 dashes and greater than symbol. Anything included in that is going to be a comment. It's going to be ignored by the browser, and it can go anywhere in the document. Okay. Then the document itself always starts and begins with an HTML tag, so an HTML at the beginning and HTML at the end. Notice this is a container tag. HTML, the opening tag, just has the tag name inside the brackets. The closing tag always has a slash in front of it. Okay, so this is the opener and this is the closer. These are blocks. They must be balanced. So in our class last semester, we talked about balancing the blocks. There we were using curly braces. Here we are all over the balance, making sure these blocks are balanced. Your page, the browser will be forgiving if you're missing tags, but not always. And it's not always forgiving in the way you want it to be. Okay, so you need to make sure that your tags are balanced and that they're nested appropriately and that you are keeping those straight. You notice as we typed in fiddle, when I typed the P tag, which is a container tag, it automatically put in the ending tag on that and did that for me. And if you're typing manually, whenever you open a container tag, like a body or a label or a paragraph, you always want to put the ending tag in right away. Okay, don't ever leave it for the end. Always put it in right away and keep those tags balanced from the beginning. Okay, because you'll never find it if you get too deep in. Okay. Inside the HTML, you have 2 primary sections: the head and the body. The head tag also has its container tag, starts with head and ends with /head. And inside the heading, these are going to be the title of the page. So in this case, the title, this is what shows up on the tab as the title of the page. You can also put things in the head, like if you want to include style sheets, CSS, or JavaScript, or you want to bring in a whole bunch of resources, those are things that you're instructing the browser to do while the rest of the page loads. So the way that the browser interprets this document is it loads the head. It receives the entire document from the server. It then begins to process that and parse that into the browser. The first thing it does is it extracts the head and looks at all the resources that it has to get and begins to send web requests to download those additional documents. Okay. Once those web requests are transmitted, then asynchronously it begins to render the body. Okay, so this is done so that the page loads faster. So that while I'm downloading CSS and JavaScript and images that are defined in the head, I can begin drawing the page with these very complex tags and sections that I'm putting in HTML. Okay, so those are done simultaneously so that the page will appear to load faster. Okay, so the head tag typically has no content; it's just metadata about the page. The body section is going to have content. Okay, the body is also a container tag with a beginning and an ending, and inside the body you put all the stuff that you see on the page. So these are going to be paragraphs and labels and links and all of those things. They all take place in the body. Okay, when we're working in Fiddle, we're typically just working in this section. Okay, in JS Fiddle, you're assumed that you're just in the body. Okay, when we're working in VS Code and on our locally on our machines, you're going to have to do the whole thing. Okay, so we're going to have some Fiddle where we're just working in the body, and we're going to have some examples where we're working the entire document. Okay, all right. We'll come back to DevTools and get into that at a later point. Okay, in Fiddle, here we're just really typing in the body section. Okay, so and we typed our example was hello HTML, right? We click run to actually render it into the panel. We use the tidy button. You can save it, which means I can save this, I can name it, and this is what you're going to want to do. You're going to want to be logged in. You're going to want to save your fiddles so that you can come back to them and work on them at another time, or that you can submit the link to me so that I can as part of your assignments. Okay. Let's do a quick look at how the let's see how we do it. I'm going to come back to this. So the last time I taught this class, I taught it in the traditional 2 sessions a week, and so some of my material is for longer classes. So I'm going to jump around a little bit. Okay. So we'll come back to that in a minute. But In the fiddle, remember, we're really just working in the body section of the document. Okay. So let's talk about style. HTML is typically all of the tags and HTML tag language itself is all going to be lowercase. Everything's lowercase. Okay. The content that you put in, the information you're showing on the page is going to be mixed case, it's going to be human readable. But all of your HTML code itself is going to be lowercase. Okay. You put no spaces in between words and phrases. So if you have multiple word phrase that you're trying to use, say a class name or some styling that you're doing, you want to say, header block or make this bold. You will separate those with dashes. Okay, not spaces. If you put spaces in between those phrases, it's going to be two different things that the document's going to interpret, that the browser will try to interpret. Okay, so if you want to use a phrase or multiple words to describe something, you use dashes. Okay, to do that. All of the tags that we deal with are all single word tags. Okay, single quotes or double quotes work. When you need to put something in quotes, you can use either single or double. Which one you use depends a little bit on what church you go to, right? I mean, some people swear by single should be everything. It doesn't really matter. The browsers are going to forgive you. Just be consistent as much as possible. Use one or the other, and try not to mix it. Okay, in your document. Okay, indentation matters. Does not matter to the browser. Your browser will interpret any HTML document. The indentation is not necessary for the browser. The indentation is necessary for me, all right, and for you, because I can't read it unless it's properly indented. Okay, so use the tiny button. If you use VS Code or Atom, there's going to be a prettify feature or some kind of auto formatting feature that will do the indentation for you. Okay, so keep that code indented. If your code is if you're losing your indentation in the code, you're going to lose your place when you get into more complex documents, and you're going to make mistakes. Okay, so keep your indentation clean. The browser can be forgiving of bad HTML. So if you forget to close a tag, you leave out the ending body tag, or leave out the ending paragraph tag, or you misspell one, the browser is going to be forgiving of some of those mistakes. Okay, it's going to fill in some places where it thinks that this paragraph probably ends here, and it's going to automatically fill that in for you. Okay, but it's going to do it the way it thinks is the right way, and so often you can have mistakes in your HTML and you'll never even notice them because your page looks fine until you get into another browser like Internet Explorer, and it's terrible, right? Because that browser is not as good at fixing your problems. Okay, there's a validation tool at W3 Schools called the HTML Validator, and you can put your HTML code in there and it will tell you if you've made a mistake according to the spec. So that is another useful tool as well. But just like in JavaScript, you can get away with sloppiness, but then sometimes it just all falls apart in the browser. And sometimes it'll work just fine, and then you make a change, and now the browser is correcting it in a way that's not what you had before. Okay? So I always say the browser can be very forgiving until it isn't. Okay? Same with JavaScript. Okay, the tags. So we talked a little bit about the HTML tag. We saw the body tag. The tags are come in two types. You either have a container tag, which means that you have a beginning tag, an ending tag, and content in the middle. Okay. You also have singleton tags or void tags. These are tags that describe a single thing and don't have an ending tag. Okay. An image is everything that the browser needs to render the image is defined within this one tag, and there is no closing tag. Okay. These are called singletons or voids. Okay. When they don't have an ending part. These are typically called containers. Almost all of them are containers. Okay. Things that are not are these tend to be very small, kind of singly contained items, an image, a line break, a horizontal rule, things like that that are the singletons. Most of what we're dealing with are going to be containers. Okay. The div and the paragraph are going to be like you're going to type this so many times in the next 16 weeks that you're going to be really good at it.
Console.log.
Right there. The div tag, you're going to have divs inside divs inside divs. So you're going to have your Yahtzee game will have a couple hundred of those by the time you're done. Okay. You can define custom tags, but we're not going to talk about that. But just know that as you get into more advanced HTML, you can actually use some custom overloads on it. Okay. So inside a tag, tags have attributes. So inside the beginning, all the attributes go in the beginning tag, in the opening tag. In the end, there is nothing in the ending tag except the end. Okay. So here, when we end the tag, when we do /p, this is all that will ever be in there. Inside the opening tag for the p or the div or the HTML, we can put attributes. Okay. So the attributes depend a little bit on what the tag is. So there are some common ones. The ID and the class are common, that are supported by every tag, and there's some others as well. But these are the most common ones supported by every tag. And they're typically used for styling. So I can use class so that I can group these elements together on the page, and I can apply style to them, or I can manipulate them with JavaScript by using the class or the ID. These are typically ways for me to use my CSS and JavaScript to select and manipulate those tags. Okay. So class and ID are going to be supported by every tag out there. Then there's other attributes that depend on what the class are. So like the A tag is a link, okay, or an anchor tag. And so the link has an href attribute, which says where do I link to, okay. And so this is included in the opening part of the tag, you can see. And then so this href says when I click on this, go to google.com. The contents that's displayed on the page when you do a link is what's inside the container. So what displays as the link, the text that displays on the page is what's in between the ending bracket of the opening tag and the closing tag. What you do when you click that link is defined by attributes in the opening tag. Okay? So tags have opening and closing. Some of them are singletons or voids. All of the attributes go in the opening tag. Class and ID are supported by everything and will be used extensively. You also can have custom tags, so things you can say data dash, and then you can create a custom tag. So if you want to say, for example, give a set of validation rules, I can say data dash validation, and I can give that a value. And then in my JavaScript, as I'm going through, say, a series of text boxes, and I want to say I want to validate this one as currency, I want to validate this one as numeric, I want to make sure this one doesn't have any capital letters. I can label each element with validation rules, for example, and then I can write code in JavaScript to read the validation tag from that label and then apply the appropriate validation. Okay? So I can carry. I can also, by using these custom tags, I can put more knowledge into my HTML document that then I can manipulate as I write code and style. Okay. And I got that. I'm moving pretty quick here. Okay. We talked about the head and the body. All of the work that our head sections are going to be very minimal. The only thing we're going to have in our head sections in this class are just going to be the title of the page and maybe some links to style sheets. Okay, so very minimal that will be going on here. All the work we're going to be doing is in the body. Paragraphs and divs are going to be primarily what we use. Okay, all right. So from here on out, we're going to be, the rest of the slideshow talks about specific HTML elements. Okay, and it's really meant to be hands-on. So before we jump into that, are there any questions about what we've covered? I'm going at a pretty rapid clip here. So any thoughts? Seems like it's pretty obvious, pretty clear. Right? Nobody's scared yet?
Not yet.
Okay. All right. Is there any questions about Fiddle? Or you won't see me again before that assignment is due. So do you feel like you know what you need to do to submit that?
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Like the editors we use, which ones are like easy? They gives you hints. Like NetBeans gives you like
Yes.
options and hints.
So for HTML, VS Code is probably the best one. Okay, so if you're going to write HTML and CSS and JavaScript on your own machine, VS Code will give you. It's not quite as advanced as NetBeans, but it's up there. Okay, so if you install VS Code on your laptop, you can install. VS Code uses something called extensions, which can bring in specific language helpers. So when you open VS Code and you create an HTML document, you'll get a little pop-up that says, do you want to download the HTML formatting extension? Just click yes, download those, and you'll be good to go. Okay. So HTML, CSS, and JavaScript are all going to be widely supported by VS Code. Okay. Atom is another one that works great. You don't get quite the IntelliSense with Atom that you do with VS Code, but it's a great tool as well. Okay. Any other questions? So on JS Fiddle, got about 10 minutes left. On JS Fiddle, when you go to submit, once I've entered this, okay, I can save it, and now I can now share this URL, okay. So if I copy this and I open it up in a incognito window, which means I'm not logged into Fiddle anymore, okay, and I click on this, I can now see this version this code that I wrote, okay. If I begin to change this now, it's not going to change my copy because I'm anonymously logged in on this particular window. So if I start changing this, it's going to create a new URL. Let's see what it does. Okay, so if I go to save that, it's saying you're not logged in, you can't save this. Okay, so when I run this, it's changing. But if I go back to my code here, this is where I'm logged in on Fiddle. You can see I'm logged in here. If I refresh this, then we're going to see that it is not updating my code. Okay, so even though I'm sharing the URL in this, because this is anonymous, or if I'm logged in, if you send me your link and I am viewing the Fiddle while I'm logged into my account, I'm not going to be changing your code. Nobody can change what you've written, but they can view it. Okay, so when you go to submit, what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to do your work here in this HTML tab. Make sure that it's rendering properly. You click Run to make it render. Okay, and then you're going to want to submit this URL. Okay, so in the assignment, when you go to submit to make a submission for the assignment, it's set up to take a web URL. You paste this in here, and it'll be sent to me. Okay, it is a good rule of thumb before you send it to me to always take this and load it up in Chrome in an incognito window. Okay, just to make sure, because whatever you see in an incognito window is what I'm going to see when I load it. Okay, does everybody understand what incognito means in Chrome?
Yeah, it's like a browser.
It's basically, it takes away all your cookies for a starter. So if you're logged in to a website in Chrome, then you've got some cookies and you've got some context in your web browser that's telling the browser it's sending data back and forth through the site that says this is Bill logged in. Okay, so if I go into incognito, all those cookies are removed from that session. So then if I go to the website, my computer won't tell the website that I'm logged in anymore. Okay, so always, before you send me your assignment, check it in an incognito window to make sure that it's, because that's how I'm going to see it. Okay, that makes sure that you've saved your work, make sure that you have the right URL, make sure that it's properly viewable. Because if you send me something and it doesn't work, I might spend a minute or two to try to figure it out, but probably not. Okay, so always check your submission in an incognito window. Okay. All right. So here, if you go through the rest of this, slideshow on your own over the next couple of days, then you'll have plenty of examples in here of all the different types of tags, header tags, text tags, formatting text, labels, paragraphs, all these different types of things. You can kind of play around with these and get a feel for them. Okay, you can take all this code and you can type it into JS Fiddle and render it and get a feel for what it's doing. Okay, so in this slideshow is some example of everything that you're going to need to do for the assignment this week. There's something there, as well as on the internet. Looking up HTML guidance and help on the internet, there's a lot of it. Okay, you're definitely going to find that. Okay, but so try to go through this. We'll pick up somewhere in here on Tuesday next week, and we'll get into some of the more complex, probably
we'll probably start here around special characters and escaping. On Tuesday, we'll pick up here. All of the stuff in between for some of the text tags and the header tags, you can work on your own as you work through your assignment. So just as an example, header tags, you have 6 header tags that come with predefined text sizes. Okay. So when I run those, I take header 1 and it's going to show up as larger text. Header 2 shows up slightly smaller. They go all the way through 6. So H5. Okay, so you see that they can get pretty small here. Okay, you can include a paragraph here. You can see that in this case the header is probably smaller than the paragraph. So here, down here at header 6, header 5, header 6 is actually by default smaller than the paragraph. The reason you would use these different sizes, these different elements, is so that you rarely would just render it as the default. The browser has a default style that it applies to every tag that you say. So here if I say H1 as my tag and I render it in the browser, the default styling of header 1 by Chrome is going to be some pixel height and black and maybe a little bold, right? But typically what you would do is you would define your own style using CSS on the header. So here I could come in and say, I want all of my header 6 to be blue, okay? And I want it to have a font size of 3 rems, which is 3 times the default font size. Strong is an HTML tag, okay? But you can also define bold using CSS for font weight, right? And so typically what some of those tags, strong and the italics tag and the emphasis tag, we'll cover those and we'll explore those in HTML, but those are largely deprecated by CSS. Okay. So you'll still see those in use somewhere, but in the work that we're going to do almost all of our presentation using CSS, and we're going to do structure of the document using HTML, and we're going to do format and presentation of the document using CSS. So when I turn something bold, is bold structure or presentation? It's presentation, right? Because it's how it looks. This is all structure, okay?
But you meant like as in you write it in HTML.
Right. Yeah. So if the strong tag in HTML is a structural tag because I'm saying I'm creating a tag, I'm putting content in it. Yeah. Okay. But what strong does is it makes the text in between the opening and closing tag makes it bold. Okay. But bold and size and color is really about presentation. So as we do our work and we create HTML web pages and we create interactive pages, we have an HTML document, which is the structure of the document. This is all the content and its containers and its divisions. This is the structural document. Think of it as, the frame that holds the house up. And then I take CSS, which is presentation. That's going to be what color are the walls, what color is the door, do I have tint on the windows? That's all presentation that we're going to define in CSS. And then you have interactivity, which is JavaScript, which is behavior. So once I actually begin to interact with the elements, JavaScript is going to control my interaction. So HTML is structure, CSS is presentation, JavaScript is going to be in behavior. Okay. Sometimes the behavior is to change the structure or to change the presentation, but you always do that through JavaScript by changing the HTML and letting the browser render. So as we get further into the class, we're going to be very, very explicit about keeping those behaviors separate in separate files on our computer, and even here on Fiddle, you see that they're all in separate panels. You have your HTML panel, you have your CSS panel, you have your JavaScript panel. So I'm not going to put CSS over here in my HTML panel because it belongs over here in the presentation component. Okay, so I'm keeping all of that code separate from each other. Okay. All right. So that's a little CSS teaser there. 3 rem is a lot. So if I take this out and rerun it again, now it's back. It's going to still be blue, but it's back to its normal size. Okay. And here in the paragraph, if I say not bold, and I'm going to say I want to make this one bold. Okay. I can come here and I can say okay, let me tidy that up. Okay, so now when I go to render this, they look the same, right? But if I say here, for everything that has the bold class, I want to apply a font weight of 900, which is bold. Okay, so now it turns bold. So now this one is bold and that one's not bold. So now I can create another, I can create a label here. I can give it a class equals bold. Okay, and when I run that, so now I can get, see, by using CSS here, I can get presentation across multiple elements, where all I have to do is say, just use the bold. This is a bold class, this is a bold class. So then in my CSS, I can say, if something is a bold class, what does that mean? Increase the font weight, change the font color, add padding around the elements, and all like that. So, okay. So presentation versus structure. Okay. All right. So any questions about your assignment? Everybody thinks it's doable? Should take you 20 minutes, right? Okay. This week is a little light on how much time you'll probably have to spend. Don't take it as the way it's going to be. Okay. We have about 75 minutes in class every week. I'll present a little bit of material. I'll do some examples. I'll answer questions, and that's really what I want to use the class time for. It's for you to get from me things that you can't get online. Okay. So make sure that you come to class if you're stuck or you have a question, or you bring that to class. Probably won't have any next week, but we'll get there. We'll get there as we get more into the journey. Okay. My expectation is that you'll spend somewhere between 8 and 10 hours a week on the class. Okay. This week probably will be 2 hours outside of class. So that's 8 or 10 hours, including the 75 minutes that you spend together in class. Okay. All right. Any questions? Feel good about the class?
Yeah.
What you thought it was going to be? Kind of don't really know yet. Okay. All right. So get your assignment in on Sunday, and I'll see you next week.